Mindy received her BA in Education from Purdue University in 1995 and completed her MS in Educational Administration in August of 2006. In August of 2002, Mindy joined the Department of Computer Science at Purdue University to begin her role as the K-12 Outreach Coordinator, which I think is an amazing position. I mean, we really need more people in that job. Prior to beginning this role at Purdue, she spent 7 years as a high school computer teacher at Marriott.
Marquette.
Marquette High School in Michigan City, Indiana. So, thank you. Oh,
Right.
and this goes till 12:15. Okay, and then at 12:30 we'll be doing lunch.
So the good news is if I get done early, you get to go to lunch early. If I get done late, lunch is still going to be there for you. So yeah, it's all good, however you work it. So Patrice, that was a lovely intro. Thank you for that. So what she didn't tell you is what I currently do. So let me tell you a little bit about who I am and what I currently do. So once again, you guys know my name's Mindy Hart. I do still work at Purdue University, but I work for a program called EPICS now, which is Engineering Projects and Community Service. You're going to hear a lot more about that later in my presentation. So we'll tell you more about that in a bit. But you are here because you wanted to hear about service learning in the computer science classroom. So some of you might have some idea what that is, or you read my great description that I wrote for the brochure or whatever and said, hey, that sounds like a lot of fun. But let me tell you what my motivation is for doing my job. So back in January, I took a trip to South Africa, and we were able to do a camp with kids. And one of the things that was kind of our logo was to do things that matter. And I think that as teachers, we tend to want to do things that matter, right? We want to make an impact on our students. We want our students to make an impact on the world around them and see what kind of impact they can have as they, kind of go on out into the real world too. So you see some of the pictures of some of the kids that we got to work with while we were there. We did some community projects as well as the summer camp that we did with them, just really to do some team building. So my next question though is, who are you guys? So that will help me as we go throughout our presentation to know a little bit more about you. So how many of you are high school teachers? Raise your hand. I'm not counting. Okay. How many of you middle school teachers? Sweet, we got it half and half, awesome. And then how many of you do something other than, 6th through 12th grade teaching? All right, so a few of you guys in there too. So that's great. So the nice thing is that hopefully what you'll learn about today is a model of teaching, pedagogy, and curriculum that you could implement anywhere or with anything that you do is what we're hoping to do with you. So, all right, so we're gonna start you with an activity. And I have to tell you the instructions from the microphone, and then I'll pass these out. But we're going to give you some Post-it notes. And on your Post-it notes, go ahead and write a list of service-type projects or volunteer opportunities that your students or students that you know, if you're not in a school, that they engage in during your school year, during the summer. Just kind of start making a list. We'll pass out some Post-it notes, so take a few and pass them down. Okay, if you still have some, you can keep thinking a little bit if you want, but who wants to share some of the ideas that you came up with or some of the things that are currently going on in your schools? Patrice, in the back. What do you got?
Okay, well, a couple of things. My school, we have something called 8th Year Leadership. So we would do food drives, an alternative gift market. We also did an e-waste. So that's one of the ways I tied into computing. We did an e-waste collection drive.
Okay.
And we also did something called Random Hacks of Kindness Junior.
Okay. Other shares in the back.
We do participation in something called a Veterans Writing Project. Veterans, particularly from World War II or Korea, are recruited. They come into the school and they tell their stories about what their experiences were to students, who then help them create a narrative and a story for kind of a living history that they then post online.
Okay. Other ideas. Rhea, what do you got?
We host a community STEM day where we have about 200 exhibits in math,
Wow.
science, engineering, and technology. I didn't say computer science.
Right.
We're going to try to have some next year. And we invite students between 5 and 13 and their families to come and just play with the experiments all day. So about 1,000 people come.
Okay. What do you got?
I run a class with special ed kids
great.
for computer programming.
Oh,
and
great.
I have kids come in and help mentor.
Okay, great. So mentoring program for Julie?
We have a club and they name themselves Swag, Service with a Goal.
Okay.
And so they thought they were really cool and it was a good name, so, and they just do obviously different projects. And one of our big ones is adopt a family at Christmas time and they do that
Sure.
one, so.
Okay. Anybody else in front?
Visit the elderly, they assist the elderly.
All right. Great. Thanks, Cindy. All right. So these are great ideas and these are great things that are going on in your school. So I commend you all for having, I don't think I saw anybody not write anything down. So I commend you for trying to make an impact in your own community and for your schools participating in these type of activities. What we want to do is we want to transition into making sure that our service projects are service learning projects, right? And so we like to say that there are 4 different ways that you can look at service learning. And so the first one is you can have service and you can have learning, right? But they don't necessarily happen together, right? So a lot of times, you know, if you just go out, you're going out to rake leaves for somebody, but there's no real content to it, it's just an activity, that would be kind of that lower level, lowercase service learning. Additionally, sometimes you can have service that's all capitalized and then learning with that. So service outcomes are primary, but then your learning goals are secondary. So it might be peripherally related to your curriculum, but it doesn't have any real learning goal attached to your curriculum. And then on the flip side, you can have small service with lots of learning. Okay, I think as teachers, sometimes we do a lot of this where we have standards that we have to meet, but let's do something that's a little bit helpful for somebody, okay? And then what we're gonna talk about is big service learning, right? So you have all capital service, all capital learning. So basically what that does is service and learning both have that equal weight, and you bring those together into one kind of common goal, okay? And so the process is to have your students learning something while they're doing, right? So it's kind of that interaction. So based on what you just heard of kind of those definitions, what would you say some characteristics of service learning are? I have prizes too, so if you answer, I'm going to throw something at you.
They seem to involve the community.
Okay, so they involve the community. Good. So yeah,
Collaboration.
collaboration. Can you catch? Okay. All right. What else?
They align to curricular goals.
They align your curricular goals. I'm so afraid to throw this because there's a wall behind you. It might bounce. Okay. What else?
Problem solving.
Problem solving. That's always a good one, right? So there's usually some sort of need and problem that has to be solved. What else?
21st century skills.
21st century skills. Good one. We want our kids ready for the next set of things that come at them.
Communication skills.
Communication skills. Good. Yes. So how do they interact with other people and themselves? Patrice.
So maybe like empowering gives kids the opportunity to do something and make a difference.
That's good. I'm so afraid of those lights. There we go. Okay. Come around.
I don't think I can catch as well.
Okay. There you go. Sure you can. All right. Anything else you guys can think of?
Leadership-based skills.
Leadership skills. Yeah. Excellent. So you want them to do a project and kind of lead the way on that versus you leading the way. That's always nice. Bria?
I'm trying to think of a term, I'm not sure I can, but having the students believe that it's relevant to them, you know, have it mean something to them. They're not just doing something to help someone
Yeah,
else, but
so-
they're invested in
So
some way.
self-impact sort of, yeah, that they're making a difference, that kind of, you know, self-actualization sort of thing. Anybody else?
Raising the level of dignity with which those supposedly being served are considered by the students.
Oh, yeah, so being equal partners in the
Yeah.
process, that's great.
Yeah.
Can you catch?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, it's a little short there. Okay, all right, so you guys are right on track, so that's great. Let's kind of start with a definition. Yes, I know this is a very long slide and I don't promote this, okay? So do not put this much text on a slide ever. Anyway, I stole this slide from somebody, so that's why there's that much text, but I tried to highlight what's important. So in a definition of service learning, you have service, you have reflection on what you're doing, you have understanding of the course content, right? So there's something that you're supposed to learn from doing, and then kind of that civic responsibility. So I'm impacting my own community, making a difference on somebody that's a peer, something like that. So this is actually a really good long definition of service learning, so I'm not gonna make you probably read it, okay. Anyway, so a couple other characteristics of Service learning. So one of the things is people are like, what's the difference between service learning and some of the other pedagogies that are out there? So, you have kind of experiential education, kind of traditional, I hate to use like home ec and old tech ed classes, so you just do, okay? So kind of I'm gonna bake, I'm gonna build, those sorts of experiential learning environments. You have active learning, so all your PBLs, so your problem-based, your project-based, anything else you want to add in front of something-based learning. Inquiry learning, okay, so those are all kind of more active learning, okay? And then there's service learning. So with service learning, you end up with this element of engagement. We talked about that, right? It's tied to those academic learning outcomes, which we thought was important too. So your students are learning something while they're doing this. There are reciprocal partnerships. So everybody has that equal weight. Somebody isn't just a client. So your students are learning something from that client too, right? And then there's a reflection piece that comes along with that. So what are they learning? How do you know they've learned? And how are they going to apply that to future things? Okay, so a few other things that we like to say are characteristics of service learning. First one's easy, right? It's service. So we want them to do something, so it's that community engagement. Additionally, academically based, right? So we want to make sure that there is that curricular content that comes along with that, okay? One of the things we mentioned before is that partnerships. So the partnerships between who you're serving as well as those being served. So who's doing the serving, who's your client, there's an equal weight in that, okay, an equal benefit in that. And then once again, that analysis and reflection part are huge. So we want to make sure that they know what they're learning, once again, and that it does tie into whatever you're trying to teach. So with those Post-it notes that you had before, your second activity, now that you kind of have a definition of service learning, is to take those and separate them into 3 different groups, okay? So the first group is that there is no, and we're going to use, so we can have the debate if you want, if STEM includes CS or not. We're going to say today it does, okay? I'm all inclusive. I didn't put STEM/CS because I think we should be part of it. So if there's no STEM or service learning in your activity, that's one pile. If there's no STEM or service learning, but it could be modified to add them, that's a second pile. And then if it's something that's already kind of a design-based STEM project, that would be part of an activity or solution, that's your third pile. So go ahead and separate those quickly. All right, so if you've had a chance to do that, what I want you to do now is kind of group up with maybe 1 or 2 other people that are nearby and share your categories with them. So share those activities that you came up with. And what I also want you to do, if you guys can do a 2-step process, is once they've shared, if there's something that was in that middle category, so that B category, that could be modified, brainstorm some ideas of how that could be modified to include some STEM or service learning, okay? So go, find some friends. All right, so do we have any groups that are willing to share how they adapted a B to a C level activity? Any groups that are willing to share? No one. Rhea, thanks.
Do you want to just share your idea?
Sure.
I know it was a group idea.
Well, really, you have a whole bunch of, I'm sorry, what's your job?
Oh, I was a student government / computer science teacher.
Right. So there's a whole bunch of kids do a whole bunch of things around the community, and there's a database that keeps track of what the kids do and how many hours they put in and all of this stuff. So if we could write a little app on a phone that each time the kid puts in, let's say, an hour into the phone, into the club, would just click and that would go into the database and say, okay, I just
put in an hour on working on this community project, and then perhaps the kid who gets the most hours can get a badge or get some sort of reward.
Okay, good.
Could even connect that with the National Honor Society. National Honor Society, they need to accumulate this.
Well, I think that this is born out of their counselors at their school track all their hours for college scholarship
I
applications
mean,
and stuff,
that
right?
they would
Yeah.
just have an automatic data
Right.
collection
Yeah.
system.
For every kid, yeah.
That's great. What else? Other ideas that you're willing to share?
Maybe I'm gonna come up with the words here, but I made the comment, a few minutes ago, that almost anything that you think is A can probably, with some little creativity, get in a B. And, you know, we were talking about, kids helping out at an animal shelter kind of stuff. I mean, there's the one thing where you say, cleaning cages and stuff like that. It by itself is not, pretty hard to judge by STEM. But the other side of the coin is that if there's somebody maintaining like a database of like workers or and which animals are being served which ways and whatever else like that, you can bring in a computer science or database type of stuff in there.
I have to come back to the microphone to comment. Yeah, so Joe, you are on the right track with that. So I heard lots of other groups say that too. They're like, well, a lot of the A's could be easily modified. But as teachers, we don't, right? So we still go pick up trash. We go rake leaves. We don't bring it up to that next level. And there's some benefit to bringing it to the next level, right? So a lot of times kids do things and they feel good about doing it, but they don't know why they've done it, right? So we're just supposed to go be nice to somebody. But is there some other learning outcome that can come out of that, which is kind of where we're moving into the direction with the rest of the presentation. So any other thoughts before we move on? Go ahead, Myra.
I do a recycle collection for my academic decathlon team because it's so expensive to run and we have no money. I was thinking because we have so few containers, maybe the kids could kind of do a feasibility study to figure out where the kids with the most cans and bottles are and maybe put our few containers in better locations than we have now.
Yeah, that's a great application too. So I love the way you guys think. I love making people problem solve and getting your brains going. So I love hearing any solution to any problem and any improvement on any solution to a problem too. So thanks for sharing that. One of the things, so actually before I move on to the next slide, how many of you went to Rhea and Elizabeth's session yesterday on the App Inventor? So yeah, so a few of you kind of saw a design cycle in action, right? If I remember. Okay, yeah. So one of the things that helps put things in context, and we'll show you kind of our program-specific design cycle here in a minute, but what we also promote through the EPICS program that I'm part of is design-based service learning. So is there some process to coming up with the projects? Is there some, iteration of design and redesign, prototyping, testing, and that sort of thing. So we do actually have a design cycle that we go through that. And it's beneficial to students, right? So up here you can see some of those things that we think are beneficial. So design, learn through experience. So not only doing things well, but learning from your mistakes too, I think are good. Seeing implications of your decisions. So sometimes you have to choose something that's less expensive and, it doesn't always, maybe it's not worth the cost of saving, right? So your product doesn't hold up. So those implications of decisions as well as then experience serving a real customer. The great thing is with our design cycle too is that you as a teacher get to act as a facilitator and coach, right? So you don't have to be the expert. As the design goes on, kids are researching, they're doing their own kind of models and coming up with that information. So you don't have to be the expert, you get to kind of coach. So this is what our design cycle looks like. It's pretty much like every other engineering design cycle with a few things starting up at project identification. So you start up here, kind of work through kind of the specs of the project down through your conceptual design. So kind of on paper, what's it going to look like? Maybe prototyping some of that, doing some detailed design. There's a delivery to your partner, your client, see what they think, let them kind of test things out. And then if, and each one of these is its own little cycle, right? So delivery, maybe you have to redesign a little bit, do something else. Service maintenance, and then eventually either retirement or redesign, come back through the whole cycle again. So that's just kind of what we've identified as something that works as a model for us. So shifting from kind of giving you that background information of service learning as a definition and kind of what it looks like, I do want to tell you a little bit more specifically about our EPICS High program and how we operate, and then shift into then what would that look like in a computer science classroom. So kind of going on to what is EPICS High. So what we try to do is we try to bring students together with their own community. We expose them to STEM fields. Once again, we consider CS as part of a STEM field, so sometimes people aren't as explicit about that, so I like to be explicit about that. Additionally, we tend to partner with nonprofits. Can you guys think of a reason why we tend to partner with nonprofits? They need us, yeah, right? So, yeah, they don't have any money either, right? So they need people to do stuff for them. Other ideas as to why?
I guess there's not really like a conflict of interest. I mean, you shouldn't be promoting somebody's business.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So a lot of times with a nonprofit, yeah, you're not getting into product or project promotion on an individual case, so it's easier to perform a service. Go ahead.
I think a lot of college students are exposed to so much recruiting throughout. It's great that they're exposed to a nonprofit to just direct them that this could be something they find rewarding as a career.
Yeah, and that's, definitely that's another one, is that kind of career exploration of, oh, I didn't realize I could use my degree in X to do this, right? Or that they need people to do these kind of things for them. So, yeah, so career exploration is a great one too. So, kind of going on with, the rest of our motivation, connecting that STEM with service learning, filling that community need, okay, those are really what we're trying to promote and what we're all about. So, the EPICS High program operates with flexible program models. So we are in rural schools, we are in urban schools, we are in suburban schools, we are in high schools and middle schools, and we actually have an elementary school that's going to come on next year to try something. They already have a community project going that we think would be a good model. So we're going to see if that will work. You can offer it as a course or a standalone class, or part of a series of courses or a standalone class. I was just in the CSTA standard session, last one, and so the whole 3C level of standards is kind of like do your own project, right? So EPICS would be a great fit into that. And then it's adaptable for every individual school or community need. So we have some schools that operate on trimesters, and they only offer it one trimester, so that's not very long, but we have other schools that offer it as a multi-year building program. So you start maybe as a freshman and then still engage on it all the way through your senior year. So it's a variety of models. So if you haven't heard about it, it's because it kind of takes a different look everywhere that it is. Our motivation for having the program, here are some things that we have learned, is that students are interested in volunteering, right? So they do want to make an impact. They want to make a difference in their community. A lot of times, service hours are needed for their diplomas or some sort of, extra addition in a school. A lot of times they have to just get those community service hours. We have found with our EPICS High program, this gets pretty amazing to people, we have participation at a 44% female level and over 50% of underrepresented minorities. So it engages an otherwise underengaged population a lot of times, because the hands-on model of making an impact in their own community draws people in. So, and then we've impacted almost 1 million people with our EPICS High projects. We've been in existence since 2006. So yeah, so we're making an impact. Go ahead, Cindy.
I don't know the term underrepresented minorities. Who falls into that category?
Yeah, so typically that's going to be Hispanic students, African American students, international students, sometimes if they're in a subcategory, depending on how schools count them. We separated out females, but a lot of times females can be an underrepresented minority, especially in CS, but we separated out that data for females too. But yeah, so typically anything that's geared at underrepresented minorities are usually African American and Hispanic. So yeah. But yeah, so we've had a pretty big impact, so we're seeing good results. So something we're doing is working, so we're happy to report that. A couple of our core values, we do like students to get some sort of credit for that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that you offer it as a course. So maybe if you offer it as an extracurricular, some schools, give points for extracurricular activities, and students earn an academic honors jacket or something like that, right? So some credit for doing what they're doing is always nice. Typically a multi-year partnership is nice to see too. So it's not just like you partner with one organization and then you're in and done. If you can develop that multi-year partnership is what we like to kind of promote, so that you have an ongoing relationship. There's that maintenance phase of a project. So if you build something and it doesn't work, who's going to fix it? So that's one of those things. And then community partners who also assist students. So we talked about that reciprocity of wanting it to have an equal impact. So it's not just like you identify somebody and we're going to go do a project for them and they say thank you and you walk out the door. Hopefully they're teaching students, especially by giving them some input of what they want and what they need. They're learning about the organization or the community or whoever they're assisting. So, all right. Some of the other things about our program, the needs that we tend to meet. So some of the student benefits, these are all these things that you all talked about. So communication skills, some entrepreneurship, career exploration, professional skills, real world experience. So you guys hit on all those. But we've also detailed out some community benefits. So who is that person or what does the community get from somebody doing this? So there's new innovative ideas that they get to try on a relatively cost-effective or basis for them, so it's not cost prohibitive to get some of those things done. And then it kind of positions them as a leader among area nonprofits. So if they see that somebody's taken interest and has done something for them, they can leverage that in their own community and then just kind of improves their current services. All right, so the big one though for you guys is that EPICS has the potential to meet many different standards. With the flexible model, we have found ways to incorporate it into all of these classes with all of these standards. We actually have a curriculum specialist coming on in August, and her goal is to make sort of a crosswalk document like CSTA has for the CSTA standards with the Common Core and the 21st century and all that sort of thing. So to do that, but to do that with all these subject-specific standards. So, if you're going to do EPICS as a computer science class, what does it look like? But there might also be some other things. So they might want to offer it in an engineering class. What does that look like? So hopefully that will be done within a year and we'll get that all done. Our projects tend to fall into 4 different categories. These aren't limiting, but they tend to fall into these 4. So you have education type projects. We've had lots of kids that create programs for younger kids. So maybe high school students are creating something to teach middle school students. So that's a great model. Additionally, a local museum or an after-school program, they can partner with them to create something that they need. Access and ability. So that's probably our second highest, which is creating a solution for an individual, maybe with a disability or some sort of access need. We had a school in Chicago that, it was fun, we were talking to these girls that did the project. They created an electronic communication device for one of their classmates. They'd never met the girl. They didn't even know she was in their school because she's in the special ed classes, but they met her and they're like, but now that she can communicate with us, she's our friend. So things like that really gave them a different kind of impact than what they thought. They thought they were just creating some sort of device and then ended up having an individual impact. So those tend to be kind of our second most popular type of projects. Human services, so those are going to be a lot of the community nonprofit type locations. So, and then environmental projects, we have a lot of those. So those may not tie into computer science as much, but a lot of times with the other sciences, that's where EPICS tends to fall. So, all right, so some project examples to run you through quickly here. So we have a school in Virginia. Once again, they partnered with a physical ed program to create some adaptive devices for the students so that they could actually participate in some of the games that they play. Additionally, we have Prospect Hill here in Massachusetts. They did an energy audit, so we heard something like that kind of going on of, are we spending too much money on electricity? Are we leaving the lights on too much? Are there things we could do? And then created a green roof project based on that. So if you guys aren't familiar with those, basically you kind of plant things on top of your roof and it helps with the energy consumption in your building. So a lot of times with cooling and heating. And then here is one of the computer examples that we have. We'll show you a couple others here in just a minute. But anyway, so Harbor Beach up in Michigan, What they did is their computer science class actually partnered with the local food bank. So they had a series of, it's kind of a smaller area, they had a series of individual churches that all had food pantries, right? But, you know, what they didn't know is like somebody would come to one and they wouldn't have any bread. Or, you know, so it'd be like, well, do you know where I can get bread? Like, nope, we just know we don't have any this week. So what they did is they created basically an interactive database for all the food pantries to keep up with their inventory and be able to access online. So, you know, they could say, oh, okay, well, you know, this church is running low on, you know, canned goods. So maybe we could have a donation or a drive that goes to that church to fill that. This one's running low on paper products, so let's see if we can get more there, and kind of then start spreading out and serving their community a little bit better and the people that were in need. Of course, one of the things that you guys will appreciate is they didn't consider the infrastructure for the wireless network that was needed. They just assumed that the church buildings all had wireless. Right? And so they're like, that's not going to work because the food pantry's down the hall and there's no computer. So, so a problem within a problem that they did eventually solve. But those are the kind of things that, you know, students as they work through real projects encounter versus just kind of a quick solution to something. All right, so stepping into what we're really here for. So how do we use computer science or service learning in a computer science classroom? So I have two examples to share with you. So one is Park Tudor High School. They are in Indiana. I was afraid that was going to happen. Okay, so of course the part that you need to see is off the screen. There we go. So over here it kind of has a little blurb about what they did. And if you can't read that, I will read that to you in front of the microphone. Park Tudor High School students built an iOS app in the summer of 2010 for the Park Tudor community to keep up with their sports scores. The computer science students continue to work on improvements to the app and have added Android app to the mix. So, so one of the things, that's just one highlight of what they've done. They've done a couple other things that I thought were pretty cool that I'll share with you. They also do a web design class and partner with local nonprofits to do web design. Pretty easy. But the students just started seeing needs within their own school and asked the teacher if they could create some solutions to some of those needs. So one of the things they noticed is that in chemistry lab, they couldn't do their lab one day because they were out of supplies or out of chemicals that they needed. So they created an app and a barcode scan system that would do an inventory of the chemistry lab closet or whatever. So teachers then, when they went to take some of the chemicals out, they would scan the barcode, put in the amount that they took, and then it would update automatically with how much was left and kind of give them a reorder status. So maybe not what we would consider a major need, but they saw it as a solution to something that would make life a little bit better for them, so that they could do the labs, which are always fun when they're supposed to do those. So that was one of them. And then in addition to the scorekeeping app that they did, they created an automatic scheduling system for their school, so kids could know how many spaces were left in classes and have access to that. We've talked with some other teachers that said there's no way our students would get access to that data. Not my problem. So I don't know how that worked, but they were able to do that. So that's one example. And then come back up. There you are. And then another one is a group, a school in Chicago, a downtown Chicago school. There we go. It's coming up. Called Westinghouse Prep. They are in the heart of downtown Chicago, a very poor school, I guess is the best way to put it, but they have a teacher that's very passionate about what he does. And so he had 12 different projects going on this year within his class. One of the projects that one of the kids did is he just went up to him and said, hey, I want to learn how to do databases. I don't know anything about databases, so sure, go ahead. And so these two kids, what they did is they partnered with the local park district there in Chicago, and there's a conservatory. And the conservatory was in need of a cataloging system, basically, to know where their plants were, like within, I mean, it's a pretty big area, so where the plants were and any data on them. And actually, I believe it's accessible to the public now too on site to say if you want to look up a specific plant, you can then kind of map it out electronically. So, once again, not a life-changing need, right? But something that was pretty important to this organization, and the students were able to engineer that solution to that need. So puts us back to you guys having to do work. All right, so here we go again. You guys can either make new friends or use the same friends that you had last time, but here's a couple questions for you to discuss with your groups, and then we'll kind of report out and see what ideas you guys have. So some projects that you're already doing in your computer science classes that might be service learning, and then maybe an adaptation of a specific computer science project that you do as to how you can make it into a service learning project. Go. All right, we're going to come back together, have you guys share a few more ideas, and then wrap things up. You guys are good. You're good. Or you're hungry, one or the other. Okay. Yeah. So do we have maybe a couple people that want to share some projects that you're already doing? All right here in the front.
Not this past school year, but the year before, I had to have some independent study kids occupy themselves. They wanted to do programming, but they couldn't program. So our guidance department was running a career day, and they said the process of scheduling all the kids with the career workshops that they wanted to go to is a very tedious process. So the kids developed an Excel application using Visual Basic in the background. And we gathered the students' choices for the career workshops, and then they were able through VBA, Visual Basic, to determine the schedule. And it saved the guidance department a lot of time. And I was thinking, well, these kind of projects, that seems like a very easy to use tool. Of course, you have to learn it, but it's a lot easier than a lot of other programming tools.
Yeah.
Visual Basic and Excel.
And I think you guys know as teachers that a lot of times we start our students with something that's maybe not as full as where we're going to get eventually, but because it's a tool that works and it gets them started on something. So I think that's a great place to start, that maybe you didn't think they had the skills that they needed or didn't know as much programming as they should have, and then you kind of work into that. But yeah, that's a great example. Maybe another sharing example. All right.
At the school where I teach, we have a magnet program called the Leadership Center for Science and Engineering.
Okay.
And last year, we agreed to actually pilot an advanced engineering course for the seniors in that. About half the seniors have been through the APCS curriculum, and half of them had not. They haven't had any significant technology training. But my school is fortunate enough to be the center where we have our students with cerebral palsy and other related disabilities. And what we did is partner with them. One of their processes is to develop jewelry from recycled newspaper and Mod Podge, and they create it into beads, and then they string them and they sell them at craft fairs and raise money. It's very successful. But the students in the program were they had difficulty because of the cerebral palsy in actually sculpting the jewelry balls and things. And so what my students did was they learned how to do design, 3D physical design in Autodesk tools.
Sure.
And they did that. We have a printer, and they created a device where they could put the Mod Podge into the chamber and then compact it down and get a nicely formed sphere out.
Wow.
Yeah. A couple of times, and the students in the program that makes the jewelry, they use it now to help themselves form these
Different shapes and stuff.
spherical balls
Yeah.
of Mod Podge so that the jewelry looks a little bit more even.
Yeah, that's a great application. Also a great example. So what about something that you could adapt into a service learning project? So maybe something you're like, oh, yeah, this is a great idea. My kids love doing this. I hadn't thought about adding X to it and making it more service learning. Anybody have any of those? Phil?
Every year I would be asked by the counseling department to do independent study with my high school kids, and I always let them do what they wanted to, and sometimes that was silly things, and sometimes it was real serious, but maybe I could propose to my kids, let's do some service learning instead. Find an organization and design your project around that.
Yeah. Anybody Anybody else? One more on that, and then we'll keep moving here. All right, or none. Okay. All right, so I'm actually going to skip this slide and then go to our kind of final thoughts. So, you know, certainly by far I haven't told you everything about our EPICS program and how it works and design of that. That wasn't the intent. It was really just to kind of get you thinking about the projects that you do in your classroom and ways to have your students have a bigger impact on the community around them. You know, we do know that young people today, they want to make a difference, but they don't always see, you know, kind of engineering and computing and those sorts of things as the way to do that. Yeah. All right, let's dance, Myra. All right. You know, communities need technical assistance, right? So we talked about those nonprofits. You know, they have those needs, and a lot of times don't have either the funding or personnel to fit those needs for them. You know, we connect a lot of our local and national needs, and then we can make a difference. So I want to leave you guys with a video that we're going to watch. Have any of you guys heard about moonshot thinking or solving for X? Yeah, Rhea has. I know Rhea has. So, yeah, so that's perfect. So, yeah, so anyway, so the idea with moonshot thinking is, we'll show you the video about what it is, but is to get your kids thinking about not just making a 10% change to something, but a 10x change to something. So kind of getting them thinking outside the box. So we'll watch this video, and then at the end I have contact information, and I have a few highlighters left if you didn't get one and you want to come get one and stuff too. So let's play this video for you.
The actual moonshot is wonderful, inspirational, poetic, beautiful, involved great technical challenges, genuine heroism. It brought the world together. But think about the Polynesian islander on the dugout canoe, deciding one day they were going to go that way. No one had ever been that way before. No one even knew if there was anything that way before. It was amazing, and it changed the world.
People can set their minds to magical, seemingly impossible ideas, and then through science and technology, bring them to reality. And that then sets other people on fire, that other things that look impossible might be accomplishable.
Galileo is such a hero, you know, in thinking big, and what he represents to me is both curiosity and wonder that humanity had, that he had, that pushed him and drove himself to invent and work on the first telescopes that allowed us to see the moon, and here we are.
These aviation pioneers were figuring it out as they went. No one really knew how to build an airplane, right? No one knew how to fly an airplane. It was amazing and crazy and wonderful, and they wanted to explore.
Many years ago, the great British explorer George Mallory, who was to die on Mount Everest, was asked why did he want to climb it. He said, because it is there.
There's so many challenges in the world, and you can feel daunted by that, you know, and sort of oppressed by that, or you kind of say, how might we think differently about this?
Everyone else in the world is working on that next 10%. If you can be the one that delivers that 10 times improvement, you have a chance to really change things.
If you want cars to run at 50 miles per gallon, fine, you can retool your car a little bit. But if I tell you it has to run on a gallon of gas for 500 miles, you have to start over.
You need a lot of courage in this work, and you need a lot of persistence. One of the things that's really critical is not only having the courage to keep trying every day or thinking big, even if you don't really 100% believe it's possible, like you might think this might be possible, have the courage to try. That's how the greatest things have happened.
You don't spend your time being bothered that you can't teleport from here to Japan, because there's a part of you that thinks it's impossible. Moonshot thinking is choosing to be bothered by that.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Humanity's progress has been a series of amazing, audacious things, from the very small and personal up to the great, big, and grand. And we are a species of moonshots. And to me, that's like the really amazing, poetic, and inspirational thing.
I think our ambitions are a glass ceiling on what we can accomplish.
When you find your passion, you're unstoppable. You can make amazing things happen. It's been true through all of history.
I believe in the human spirit, and I believe that there are always going to be crazy people who will get out of bed one morning and say, you know what? I think I can build a space elevator, and let's go and do it. But I think that if we become afraid to take these great big risks, we stop inspiring people. We stop achieving things. And the biggest nightmare scenario is that we won't have what it takes to solve the really big challenges.
When Kennedy said that we would put a man on the moon, it's about the fact that he said, we don't know how to do this yet, and we're gonna do it anyway. And that sends chills up everybody's spine. Because if that happens, what couldn't we do?
All right, for some of you, that 10x thinking is maybe just making that shift from traditional teaching to maybe a service learning model, and that can be a big jump for you. Additionally, like we mentioned, that some of the schools that participate in our program, the teachers didn't know a whole lot about what the student wanted to do, but gave them that permission to find those answers on their own. And for those students to discover those solutions, that became their 10x thinking too. So just kind of wanted to leave you with that thought of, doing things that matter and making a difference in your communities, and really encourage you. Certainly I can tell you more about our EPICS program if you want to follow that model, but it's really just to encourage you to, think about the projects that you do in your class and get your students making an impact where they live and where they are. So there's my contact information. Feel free to shoot me an email or look at our website if you want more information. Thanks.